Happy Wednesday, everybody. It's time for another edition of PTN Extra. I'm Courtney Mims, he's Evan Camico, and he is Mike Irwin. And guys, what everybody is talking about this week, because it's July officially, and we are talking about a new era of college athletics. If you've listened to any of our PTN Extras, you might know what we're talking about, and that's a new era of revenue sharing. And for people who don't know exactly what that means, it means that the universities now will be able to pay the athletes, taking some of that revenue that they make and sharing it with their student athletes. There is going to be a cap, though, of $20.5 million. So there is that stipulation for all programs. But we don't know the exact percentages. We got a chance to talk to Arkansas's new GM of athletics last week, and Remy Koffield. And he said, no, I'm not going to give you those exact percentages. Why exactly is he doing that? For everybody at home that's going, what do you mean he's not telling us? Does he have a plan? Does he not have a plan? He does have a plan. Arkansas does have a plan. They're not sharing those percentages because they don't want to let any other program know exactly what they're doing. So guys, we don't really know exactly what Arkansas is doing. However, our friends over at NIL/NCAA.com put together some percentages that they think every single school will do. They put out one for Arkansas. I'd like to show you what it looks like. I'm going to say this very loud and clear. These are estimations. This is not exactly what Arkansas is doing. Like I said before, Arkansas is not sharing exactly how they're breaking it down, but this looks to be a good estimation, I think. You know, football getting 73% of that pot. Basketball's next, getting around 20%. And baseball, 5.7%. What I've noticed when looking at other programs on that estimation, you guys can go look at yourself online right now, NIL/NCAA.com. Baseball is getting more, or they're predicting baseball to get more here at Arkansas than other programs. I think that's pretty smart. Softball, 0.5%. You have women's basketball, 0.4%. Track and field, both track and field teams, 0.2%. You've also got gymnastics getting 0.2%, volleyball and soccer, 0.1%. Now, there are other schools on that graphic, or other programs on that graphic. Every program is represented. It's just they're not all given a percent because the percentage is so small that they might be getting some money, but not a whole lot. Okay, now that I've explained all of that, let's get to these guys right here. Mike, I want to start with you because we've talked a lot about revenue sharing. You see those percentages. Do you like that plan? Do you think that's a plan that Arkansas hopefully is following a little bit there? Or would you like to see more or less go to other sports?
I like it. For the first time since Title IX took over and schools were forced to cut back some on men's scholarship and add women's scholarships, somebody, and this was a federal judge, by the way, finally acknowledged that there ought to be something extra for those sports that are generating the money. So, for instance, what we've got here is a situation where probably, we are already hearing that through Title IX, some schools, some programs within a school, they're going to sue based on you're not giving women's sports enough. You're discriminating against this. And what this judge was basically saying is nobody's discriminating against you. You're getting a scholarship. You're getting a scholarship in a sport that's costing the athletic department money. You're not only not generating much money, you're costing them a net deficit. And yet, your scholarship is being made available by football and basketball and baseball because they are generating the money. Mm-hmm. So instead of being mad and suing, be happy that you've got your scholarship and accept the fact that the people that are in those sports that are generating that revenue are going to be allowed to have more of this. Because like in any business, and you can go across the country in any sort of business, they differentiate between ordinary employees and those that generate most of the money for that business. If you generate most of the money, like in sales, you're going to make most of it.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
And I totally agree with you. I was explaining to people who were asking me about this on social media just yesterday, and I was explaining to them, I don't see why there should be outrage because, yes, I love women's athletics. I think women's athletics should be hyped up. I think it's growing in popularity. But when football makes a large chunk of that money, when it makes the most in any athletic department, it makes sense they're going to get a huge pot of that money. It just makes sense. Now, what I like about a plan like this, you're still seeing women's athletics on there. I was shocked to see track and field get more than soccer, right? Because soccer is very successful here at Arkansas. And so to see track and field get a slice of the pie on that graphic, I think that that's something that they should implement. Evan, I want to get your thoughts. Because baseball, seeing them with 5.7%, that's just, if my math is right, it's about $1.1 million for baseball.
Yeah, there's some reports that are out there that are saying baseball is getting the second most money out of any school in the entire country. So again, I do think that's great. I'll put a caveat in that right now, but what I really want to hit on is the fact that what people I don't think at home really recognize and understand is the amount of money that's generated from football because of the TV deals. That is massive. You want to know why realignment's happening. You want to know why all these programs are moving around, why the Pac-12 is pulling Texas State in, why UCLA and USC left for the Big Ten from the Pac-12. It's because of the amount of money that these schools can make off of these TV deals. They are massive. They're lucrative. The Big 12 is going to have to go out and get another deal in about a year or two. That's why they're kind of looking at another expansion. So there's a lot of things that go into this that I think that people forget about. And the reason why football is so big is because you have all these slots on Saturday that they fill, and that's where 60 to 70% of your revenue comes from, is coming from the TV deals. That is a huge thing as to why football gets the amount of money they do, because they bring in all of it mainly because of their TV deals. Now, with that being said, and you look at the other sports, it's great that baseball is getting a lot of money because Dave Van Horn can go out and continue to get this program to Omaha. What are some of the rumors the last couple of years as to why maybe they haven't had that great as well? Because who knows what NIL money that these teams are being able to get when you're trying to attract top talent in the transfer portal. So I really do think it is an interesting thing that all these sports are getting some. I will agree with you. I do think it's very intriguing that track and field, and rightfully so. Like, let's be real, Chris Johnson and Chris Bucknam, what they do over at the track and field is phenomenal. 51 national championships, yada, yada, yada. I can go on for days talking about them. But to see that they're getting more than soccer doesn't surprise me, but to see soccer and volleyball around the same thing, that does surprise me. You think Colby Hale would get a little bit more than maybe Jason Watson, just based off of track record of the program and what Colby's done over the last 5 years versus volleyball, who is, and I've been covering them really closely for the last 2 years, who's really had that one great year in 23, and then last year they were in this rebuild. So I am interested in that, but it does make sense overall why these sports are doing it. Again, I think a big thing is their output, right? Yeah. What are they doing? How good have they been? And for baseball to get to Omaha this year, and then to get a so-called 5.7%, so 1.1 million, whatever the math is, I think that's massive.
Well, and I talked to some people about this too, because we know that Coach Cal had a nice hefty NIL budget this past season, right? And a lot of people were worried about, okay, with the revenue share, with them, if they only get 20%, again, if my math is correct, I'm doing quick math in my head here, around $4 million something dollars. Yeah. That's going to be less than what he's dealing with. If, again, we're only going off of what we know. And, the funny thing about all of this, guys, is that, and what I've been saying, preaching from the rooftops, is I'd like to see these numbers become public. I would like to see these numbers become something that you could FOIA, right? That's something that you could go and say, how exactly are these athletes being paid? I think that that's important for the public to know. I think that's important for Razorback fans to know. Right now, we don't know that. We never have known that, and I don't think in the future we're going to know that. These programs want competitive advantage, so they want to hide exactly what they're doing, so they don't give Arkansas doesn't want to give Texas A&M exactly what they're doing. Texas, Florida, Alabama, you name it in the SEC, you name it beyond that, what they're doing, because they want to keep that secretive. I do think we should get those numbers, though. I still believe in that. I'm going to preach that here on PTN Extra. Guys, something else to talk about is Remy Koffield and the hiring of him. We got to hear from him last week. I thought that was very beneficial, talking about, letting the public know what's going on. I think it's good to hear from Arkansas's new GM of athletics. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to talk a little bit about that press conference with Koffield coming up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to this week's PTN Extra. We've been having a great discussion about revenue sharing so far and what it could look like for Arkansas. Guys, before we get into Remy Koffield and what he said last week in his press conference, in his first press conference as Arkansas's new general manager of athletics, I want to get your guys' thoughts on revenue sharing as a whole. because Mike brought it up during the break just then. You know, this really is a very slippery slope to go down, especially if teams cannot meet the cap of $20.5 million. They're already behind the curve, right? With teams that can meet that amount of money and pay that to their athletes. And two, if they can't meet that and they're trying to meet that, what does the future of these smaller sports look like? Mike, I mean, we could see some smaller sports go,
Absolutely.
right?
If this turns out to be a widespread problem, you could see schools eliminating sports. But now you've got a problem under Title IX. If you start eliminating women's sports, you have to eliminate an equal number of scholarships on the men's side. So, for instance, tennis might end up being a net casualty at this school or other schools. How about golf? You might not have a tennis team or a golf team as a result of having to pay these athletes this money. And so nobody knows exactly where this is headed.
It's also scary because, again, if schools are going to try and meet that $20.5 million, if you notice on that website that I brought up before doing all these estimations, they estimate that some schools will not be able to meet that. What shocked me was them saying Missouri is a school, maybe not shocking so much, just that they estimate that Missouri may not meet that cap, Evan.
It's kind of just the new version of what was going on with all these NIL collectives a year and a half ago, where you have schools like an Ole Miss, Penn State, USC, who are able to get the money and be able to be some of these top competitors in the field, versus a school like Arkansas, who would go around the state and still struggle to get money from people. So I think this is kind of the new wave of that, where instead it's more regulated in terms of how these schools are getting the money and where the money is coming from. But you're right, the reality is there are places around, and we saw that in the last version of this, that now these schools can't come up with that money because they can't get the boosters to get into it and all of that, and can't get the money that they're putting in out of it. Again, it kind of goes back to what we were saying in the last block of, well, if you're selling X amount and you can't make at least even back, why are you even going to put that much money into it? So it's all sales. It's all what you get in is what you get out. So I'm really curious as to, I do believe most of the SEC and the Big Ten will be able to get the money, but for me, the question is, as a college sports fan, is how does this trickle down to schools in the Missouri Valley, the MAC, the MAAC up in Jersey and in the East Coast? What about these smaller schools that can't get to 20 million? Like, that's the great thing about baseball postseason, is that you just had Murray State go all the way to Omaha. Like, they're still going to be able to do it.
You
but
think
maybe
they're
not
paying
to the
their
extent,
athletes?
but if you look at football, right? Like, that's the thing of the past anymore. You're not going to have these Cinderella teams besides the one group of 5 school who gets the automatic bid every year, who's going to be able to compete. And that's the downside of all of this, because if Missouri can't get $20.5 million, you think any school in the Missouri Valley is going to be able to do that either?
No, absolutely not. Go to that website. They break it all down for you with even some of these smaller programs. And to me, it's going to be interesting, like you said, the trickle-down effect. How does that affect March Madness? How does that affect the College World Series? Do you ever see a team like Murray State get back there? I think about those things with how college athletics is turning into more of a business. It's the pros now. Let's be honest. Let's just be honest about it. I do want to get into Remy Koffield and his hiring at the University of Arkansas. A lot of people were kind of confused about his role. And I want to say this to everyone out there who is confused about what he does. He was hired for the money side of things. He was hired to look at this cap and go, here's exactly how we're going to distribute this money. He was hired to say to the coaches, who do you want me to target? And let's see how we can make the money work for them, right? He's doing all of those business deals. What he's not doing, Mike, he's not taking over for the athletic director. So he's not hiring coaches. He's not firing coaches. Sorry for everyone out there who thought he was going to have anything to do with that. And 2, he's not going to decide what sports stay and what sports go. Again, those things are going to be for the athletic director. Now, he is the deputy to the athletic director, so he is, going to be working a lot with Hunter Yurachek, but he is not going to do some of those things that the athletic director still does. Now, I thought it was interesting him getting to talk to us last week. There was a lot of things he couldn't say, I think, because Arkansas is keeping the cards close to their chest when it comes to exactly how they're doing revenue sharing. But Mike, what were your overall impressions
Well,
of
let's
Remy?
talk about what he said, because there was a lot he didn't say. But in effect, if you go back to the end of last football season, We all remember that period where we started hearing that Luke Hasz is leaving. That Arkansas is losing a couple of their starting offensive linemen. They're going to other schools. What's going on there? And the story we got was that those people, as they got toward the end of the season, and this happened before the end of the last regular season game, their agents or their family or they were basically telling Sam Pittman and some of his other coaches, hey, I need this much money next year. And they were very uncomfortable talking money with athletes. And so when it was all over and they lost some of these guys, Sam Pittman was really high on this idea of having a GM to come in and have these conversations so that you don't get animosity between players and coaches. They can pass it off on and Remy Koffield said, what did he say? He said, I'm perfectly fine with being the bad guy.
Yeah, I asked him that question. I asked him that. I wanted to know how comfortable he was with the uncomfortable conversation. Seems like he's very comfortable with it, Mike.
Yeah, so then what he can do is if a Luke Hasz comes to him and says, hey, I need this much money, and then he goes and talks to Sam Pittman, and Sam said, we like him, but what about this guy, and this guy? And he has to come back, and Remy Koffield has to say to him, look, you're valuable to us, but we have to consider these players and these players and these players, and when you look at the whole budget, you're asking for too much. You're going to have to take less. We just don't have it.
Yeah.
That's what he will do.
Absolutely, and I like his attitude, guys. That was one of the positives from him. I like his attitude. He came in, Evan knows this because we were in the press conference. He comes in, he introduces himself to everybody one-on-one. Hi, I'm Remy Koffield. He wanted to know and get to know us, which I really, really like. I will say there's positive and there's negatives. Some of the things that concerned me a little bit was that he couldn't give a lot of information, right? And I understand the reasons for that, but I also, for being hired back in April, he was supposed to have some staff members hired on with him, and he said he's kind of still in the process of doing that, and I'm going, it's July, we got to get on that. So, Evan, I'm kind of wondering your takeaways a little bit, if there was anything that you thought was really positive and maybe some concerns as well.
Yeah, the positive is I thought he was a great communicator. I really thought that he laid out what he could tell us very well. I thought he was really good when talking to media. Now, for everyone at home, do you care about that? Probably not. Only we do here who have to cut all that sound to get it to you guys. But I will say what I am concerned with has been kind of a concern. Mike and I talked about this on Pig Trail Show Sunday night, is he's a basketball guy, and he's primarily hired and brought here to be the football GM, right? Like, let's be real. Dave Van Horn knows what he's doing with baseball. Coach Cal, you're really going to have Remy Koffield, and Remy's got a great background. Boston Celtics, director of scouting, their G League GM for a year for the Maine Celtics. You really think Remy Kofield's going to tell Cal what he can and can't do? I definitely don't. I think you're crazy if you do.
No.
But what I'm most nervous about is his football background and how will scouting, because again, you've only scouted basketball players. You are coming from Boston. You've only worked for the Celtics for the last 12 or so years. How is that going to translate to finding high school talent and recruiting that high school talent? Let's be real. Arkansas has done a really good job. Their class of 2026 so far, what they have on paper. But the reality is you need that quick. How well will he be versed in the portal and understanding these guys? And to be is he just going to be the bad guy for Pittman? Like, I don't think you're going to bring in a GM just to be the bad guy for Sam Pittman. That kind of seems pointless with a guy from a basketball background. So I think that's my biggest curiosity is, where does his knowledge lie in that? Has he learned that yet? What's going to happen there? So I think that's the big question for me is, how is he fit to help the football team? And look, maybe it is to just be the bad guy. You've got Bobby Petrino, T. Will, very good coaches over there. Do not get me wrong, but at the end of the day, where's the give and take, right? Like, where is it going to come? Where's it going to go? And how is he really going to help all of these sports, right? Like, how is he going to help soccer and all of that? Yeah.
This is why it was originally explained that you would have a separate person in him,
under
him for each sport.
Well, that's why I'm concerned.
Okay.
That's my biggest concern.
Let me tell you what
it sounds like we're all on the same page.
Let me tell you what I think's going on.
Okay.
They suddenly realize they don't have the money for that.
There you
so
go.
if you don't have the money for that, what does Remy Koffield do? It's real easy. He doesn't walk in there and tell Sam Pittman how much money to spend for each player. He goes to Sam Pittman and says, okay, here's the money you have. here are the players you're looking at. Give me the mix.
Yeah.
Tell me
yeah.
tell me what each one should get. And then he goes in and just tells them that.
And he did mention that. To be
Yes.
fair, he did say that. He said, "Look, we have a great staff on every single sports team here with great scouts, especially on the football side of things. I trust what they're doing there. Hopefully, they can trust me as
Yeah.
well to get in the mix a little bit." He's not doing that so far, but the staff. I wanted him to
Right.
come in here and tell me, "Hey, I've brought on this guy, and this guy." And he kind of went, "Well, we're still doing some things with our staff." And
He said
that's
it's
where-
coming.
I just
Yeah.
hope he's able to kind of spread out the love to every single team. Clearly,
Yes.
the numbers say that he is, whether or not
The
people agree with it.
estimations do,
The
so.
estimations. But I hope that he puts in the time himself to talk to all of these teams, because you've got great teams on this campus. I think we were doing PTN Extra a couple of weeks ago, and it's like football, 7-6 bowl game, men's basketball, Sweet 16, baseball, Final Four, soccer Elite Eight, you can name it, volleyball, the run they had last year to the Elite Eight, you can name it, the sports are here, track and field championships. So hopefully that he's able to treat track and field or tennis just like he is football. That's my hope.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, the word is that in conjunction with all of this, revenue sharing and this, there's also another aspect of that that's developing, and that is the SEC, Big Ten, and I assume the two other Power Four conferences. They're being encouraged by the network people, give us better games.
Yeah.
And this is why we're hearing a lot of stuff about in the future, you're not going to see Alabama play Alabama State. They're going to play Notre Dame because we want big games. We're ABC.
It's all about the money.
We're
Big
ESPN.
games, big
we
money.
want big games. And that will supposedly, once that's in place, if they do agree to this, if the Power Four agrees to it, and I don't think they have a choice, then you're going to see more money coming to each school. And so these revenue problems we're talking about will probably go away for those schools. It's not going to go away for those other schools.
Nope.
So
No,
you're still, what we're going to see is a separation of probably about 60 or 80 schools across the country from the rest of them.
It'll turn into a real feeding area, right? Where
Yep.
you'll go, kids who cannot get to in Arkansas, Indiana right away will go to these smaller schools
That's right.
and then move up the ladder. And that's just what you're going to see. It's kind of like European soccer. Obviously, the relegation's not going to be there, but you start young. You start when you're young at these small schools, get experience, then transfer to the bigger schools.
But that's great. That's all great, guys. We haven't mentioned something. If you take away those games, that's where a lot of these schools rely on a lot of their money from these playing these
I don't
bigger
know what's going to
programs.
happen to them. I
Survival
really
of the
don't.
fittest.
It brings up a whole bigger question. Maybe we can talk about it some more on next week's PTN Extra because we are running out of time, guys. So thank you so much for joining us on this week's show. Hey, if you have any questions about revenue sharing, write into us. Let us know because we want to answer your questions while we're in the talking season, and that's for the next couple of weeks. We want to answer your questions. We want to know what you guys want us to talk about on the show. So let us know. Let us know in the comments below, and let us talk about what you want to hear us talk about, okay? But for Mike Irwin, Evan Chemical, I'm Courtney Mims. We'll see you next Wednesday.